Buongiorno a tutti, grazie per essere con noi oggi nell'ultima sessione dedicata appunto durante questa conferenza APRE, l'ultimo giorno appunto dell'APRE Dialogue, dove appunto andremo a discutere appunto sul tema dell'innovazione, ma appunto sul tema dell'innovazione in Europa. Avremo con noi tre relatori dalla Commissione europea, anche di Terna, e abbiamo anche le casse depositi e prestiti che saranno con noi a discutere appunto sull'innovazione e l'ecosistema europeo dell'innovazione. Il dialogue si svolgerà in inglese, quindi passerò chiaramente adesso in lingua inglese per approfondire meglio anche con i nostri relatori. So, thank you very much for your kind attention, everyone. My name is Stephen Frigerio. I am the National Contact Point here in APRE. It's a pleasure to have you all here with us. And today we'll be discussing about the innovation ecosystems here in Europe, but specifically going into how we can improve the innovation ecosystems in Europe. Today we have very special speakers with us. We have a speaker from the European Commission, Ms. Anna Panagopoulos from DG RTD. She is the Director of the European Research Area and Innovation at DG RTD, who is with us today, and we are happy to have her in this panel discussion. We also have Ms. Daria Ciriaci from Cassa Depositi e Prestiti. She is the Vice President of European Affairs at Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, who is with us today as well on this interesting panel on innovation. And of course, finally, last but not least, Mr. Luca Marchisio, Head of Strategy from Terna SPA. So today we're going to have this discussion with all of with these panelists today with us to discuss essentially about how the innovation ecosystem landscape is developing in Europe. And we are going to be specifically try and illustrate how the innovation ecosystem in Europe is developing. We're going to be presenting three specific arguments as to whether or not the innovation ecosystem in Europe is well developed. And we will also understand whether or not the developed ecosystem is actually well connected between the innovation actors. And finally, we'll also try and look into how we can better exploit the opportunities in Europe of innovation, and specifically between the innovation ecosystem actors. So today we are going to be discussing these, and I think we're going to be having a very interesting discussion between three different entities or three different elements of, shall we say, important actors as well that are part of the innovation ecosystem. So I will be obviously presenting these questions, and I think we should first of all start with a current snapshot of the European innovation ecosystem. And of course, this is an ecosystem which is developing and developing over time, but at the same time, we believe that maybe there are aspects of the innovation ecosystem that are fragmented, that are inefficient, that maybe they need to be built between each other. So today, my first question will be based on this question, on specifically this aspect, and I'm sure we have now a visual illustration of what we mean by this. So I will pose the question to the director, Ms. Anna Panagopoulou. What is your interpretation of the innovation ecosystem in Europe as it stands? Assuming that, of course, that there are aspects that we need to improve upon in terms of how they are somewhat fragmented. What is your view of the inefficiencies between the innovation actors? Do we need to take a step back? And do we need to develop these linkages? Or do you think we need to build on them?
So, good afternoon to everybody. I'm extremely happy to be with you today and thank you for the invitation. From the European Commission side, we strongly believe that developing further innovation and the innovation ecosystem is an important element for delivering the twin and the transition and green and digital transition, but also to promote the economic growth of Europe. Of course, we have, I would say, a strong innovation system in Europe, which composed of talents, composed of research and innovation actors, universities, and of course, a lot of SME scale and spin-offs and startups. That is the backbone of our innovation system. And a lot has been done over the last years in order to promote and to upgrade this innovation system that we have in Europe. But if we look the overall innovation landscape in Europe, we have some striking evidence of where we are lagging behind. First of all, the innovation system that we have is still fragmented, and we have to do more to connect this innovation ecosystem, the local and regional, and to probably have an ambition to create an efficient pan-European innovation ecosystem where talents, knowledge, and innovations can be transferred and between the different actors, and we need to have a more coherency between the different actors. This goes hand by hand also with the need to have a more innovation cohesion across Europe. The second thing that we see from the work that we have done so far and the analysis that we have done is that we are lacking behind scale ups. And if we look what happens with our competitors in the United States, for example, we are lacking behind the unicorn numbers also in Europe. And when we look at what are the main challenges that we have in European innovation ecosystems is lack of smart investments for scaling up startups, spin-offs, and SMEs. We need researchers and talents that they will bring products into the market. We do a lot of excellent research, but we cannot value ideas and the research that bring them into the market. We have the persistent innovation divide, which has as a result to have a fragmented innovation ecosystem and to hidden to be a bottleneck between the different actors to collaborate. And also we have a business environment which overall is more risk averse and less conducive to innovation. I think this is the situation that we have. And of course, what we have, what is the powerful of Europe, or how Europe can facilitate and contribute in this situation is first through its research and innovation program, which is extremely important. And based on the midterm review that we had for Horizon Europe program, we managed to bring on the table new instruments like the European Innovation Council, which addresses all the aspects of the gaps that we have in the European innovation ecosystem in Europe, in particular also by supporting SMEs and startups to better connect it and better establishing network and having more opportunities about promoting their innovations and push to have more innovations and finance their disruptive innovations. But we have an overall and research and innovation system program, which is very much promoting research that brings results, deliver impact, and in particular produce solutions for the green and digital transition, which is among our priorities that we have. So we hope and we believe that the new Commission Horizon Europe program will contribute a lot to alleviate the bottlenecks and to promote more disruptive and breakthrough innovation in Europe. And we have to highlight here that 70% of the budget is earmarked to SMEs. And through IC, we try to have a one-stop shop for innovators that they are able to produce results from the idea up to the market. But we also believe that apart from the framework program, it is a moment to look more at the policy aspects and what could be done at European level in close collaboration with stakeholders and the member states in order to recognize the gaps that we have and to establish new policy instruments that will enable us to go towards a less fragmented and more powerful innovation ecosystem will support technological leadership in Europe.
That's very interesting that you touched upon some aspects as well with regards to what the European Union is doing, especially to provide that push to bridge, let's say, innovation ecosystem actors together, because of course it is the overarching, let's say, institution that can better support, let's say, the innovation ecosystems. But if we sort of drill down as well to those stakeholders, which we have here as well today, from the financial sector and also from the industry, that obviously are part of this puzzle, that obviously need especially to work in hand with, let's say, the Commission on these aspects. So this is an interesting point, because you did mention about, of course, how, let's say, the financial intermediaries or people that bring in, let's say, the investments are key to bridging these ecosystem stakeholders, which brings me to Daria, of course, and how you see this from your perspective, even from, let's say, a national point of view, but maybe even from a European point of view.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes.
Let me first start thanking APRE for arranging this insightful event and Anu for starting the panel with such an important question. Let me start also saying that I agree with everything that Anna just said. And in general, I do believe that more needs to be done to increase the maturity of the innovation ecosystem in Europe and improve the innovation performance. So our performance increased a lot as a whole over the year, but it's true that we're still doing worse than other key international competitors, US, Japan, but we know that. And China is catching up also very, very, very fast. So there is no doubt that we cannot afford any step back with innovation policy that the Commission is pushing so much and have pushed so much over the years. Having this as a background and trying to complement what has been said so far and touching on the fragmentation problem, I believe that there are two main sides of this problem, and then maybe in the discussion later on I will add a third one. First, in the EU, we have a fragmented ecosystem of innovation actors, but this is not the only fragmentation that I see, let's say, working now and in the financial sector. So having the opportunity to look at this landscape from another point of view. So also that the landscape of initiative and tools supporting innovation risk to be, let's say, perceived, and actually it is somehow very, very fragmented. This makes it very difficult for the innovation actors looking for funds to understand who is on the lead for what. But starting from the first side of this fragmentation, I mean, this is rooted, we know it in the key features of European industrial fabric. It can't be anything else if 99 out of 100 enterprises that are active in the financial sector are SMEs. But this is only one side of the issue. As Anna was said, we have also a problem of scaling up. So we have a lot of SMEs, few of them are becoming mid-caps and then large enterprises. And I remember I've been working at the Joint Research Center in Seville for 3 years as a postdoc. And something that was emerging very, very often is that the EU is especially missing large companies in those sectors with the highest R&D intensity. I mean, software and computer services, pharmaceutical and biotechnology, technological hardware. And this is particularly concerning if we combine this piece of information with another piece of information that is coming by a recent report of DG Connect on open innovation, that large companies can create their own innovation ecosystems with positive spillovers on SME operating in the same sector. So it's not simply we have a fragmented innovation landscape. What we miss, those large companies able in R&D intensive sector to create their own innovation ecosystem, spilling positively over our SMEs. Down, going back to the second side of this fragmentation problem, so the policy side, so what I am observing as a user, let's say, of EU funding. My perception is that startups and innovative SMEs are still having a hard time in navigating a very complex landscape of instruments and tools supporting innovation, but not only. I read that some days ago in a letter that was addressed to President von der Leyen, Commissioner Breton, and Commissioner Gabriel, a coalition of startups association advocated for greater coordination, and asking for a coordinated approach where similar initiatives would share the same goal are bundled somehow, to have efficiency. And the work that APRE is doing in helping this is, for sure, very, very important. So what policy recommendation, let's say, from my side, let's try to ensure that SME and startups do understand and make the most of the available tools supporting innovation. This means that I don't believe that we need new structures, okay, or to support innovation. I believe that what the Commission has already put in place and all the simplification that has gone through Horizon is already an excellent starting point. But I think that we really need to simplify a little bit more, streamline, and make a better use of the existing one, Stephen. So enough for now. I'm happy to discuss about solution later on.
It's interesting that you mentioned about the role of industry as well in creating, let's say, the importance of industry in Europe to create innovation ecosystems, because essentially they are key as well in investing in R&D and obviously maybe reinforcing the innovation ecosystems. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that, Luca, about the role of, let's say, the industry maybe in developing, or maybe where you see the fragmentation within your industry, maybe even from a more technical point of view, and whether you see maybe the role of Terna as obviously as one of the large industry players into developing those ecosystems, or where you see the gaps and what can be done.
Yes, of course. So thank you for inviting me. I'm working in an industrial company in the energy sector, so I cannot consider myself an expert in innovation strategy at all. So I'll try to give a contribution from the point of view of someone who's working on a daily basis in the industry sector, even if I'm involved in the energy sector, and specifically I'm working in electrical TSO, and I'm deeply convinced that our role has become incredibly important to foster to support the energy transition. And I'm very happy to hear that Anna said that the energy transition, the ecological transition, is the fundamental aspect where she's mostly focused in terms of fostering innovation. Having said that, I think that still talking about my field of interest, the answer to the question depends on what we are talking about. In our case, first of all, at least with a 10-15 years forward point of view, we are not talking about launching rockets on Mars. We are talking about implementing in a smart way and in a coordinated way technologies which are already mature and available in most cases. But there are two dimensions of innovation which are complementary one to the other, but very different. The first one is technological innovation, going back to the basics of electrotechnics, the basics of how energy flows works, and specifically in this case electricity, because this is the key to decarbonize the hard to abate sectors, at least for the next 15 years from now. And here we are talking about technological innovations which are which imply huge investments. You need huge laboratories, you need thousands of researchers, you need to spend a lot of money to innovate, to develop something which is significantly relevant. And here I'm talking about high voltage direct current technologies, technologies to transport more energy and more current with the same lines, with the same impact on the infrastructure, on the citizens, minimizing the impact on the citizen, transporting the electricity produced by wind offshore in the mainland, guaranteeing the stability of the electricity grid, even if you lose inertia, you lose rotating masses, blah, 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 all things which are being highly discussed for those working in this field, obviously. And on this one side, innovation doesn't come from four guys in a garage. It's impossible. So we are talking about spending huge amounts of money, investing in the capacity to develop something which is really expensive. And an example of this is what the Commission has been doing, for instance, to foster the big construction facilities for storage for batteries. That's an example, but we need this kind of investment, and these kinds of investment in research and innovation today are carried out by very few very big players in an oligopolistic scenario, ABB, Siemens, blah blah blah. So innovation in these technologies is today carried out only by the industry and only by these very large industrial players who can afford, some of them more, some of them less, huge investments in innovation. On the other side, you have the other key fundamental challenge that we have to solve, which is involving customers, making them become active players in the transformation. And this is not something which is cool per se, because the customer is very happy or he finds very attractive spending all the day switching off and on his devices. It's not like that. We know that, everybody knows that, because we have been testing that for years. But the fact is that we actually absolutely need an active participation of these small distributed resources in the environment, in the energy system of tomorrow, because otherwise the system simply doesn't work, and you cannot integrate huge volumes of renewables if you do not find someone who is willing to interact actively with the grid, guaranteeing the instantaneous balancing between injection and withdrawal, which is the only true single most important challenge that we have to face in the future. And in order to accomplish that, the challenge is observability and controllability of the small distributed resources, which for the next 15 years are mainly two: electric vehicles and heat pumps, transportation and heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. These are the two technologies which must become interactive, which must interact with the grid, making the grid know what they are doing and what they are available to do in order to guarantee the balancing of injection and withdrawal. In order to accomplish that, I think that we need a different innovation model where we set up top-down, maybe even sometimes killing some innovation, but we must set up on a top-down basis the standards, the communication standards, the communication protocols with the European standardization, and we have to set the rules by which the four guys in the garage can develop an app which can provide value for the customer, being sure that that app can speak natively with all the electric vehicles, with all the recharging stations, with all the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning devices which will be sold in Europe. Otherwise, it's very difficult for someone to develop something which can have a broad application. This is something that we are discovering every day. We have differences in communication technologies already among the Italian manufacturers of boilers or heat pumps, but at European level, this is an absolute mess, and the aggregators keep asking for standardization. And one example that we, as TSOs, we are trying to do is, for instance, a new code that we have called Equity, which is working exactly to find a communication standard, a communication protocol between these devices and the system operators. So I think that this also the solution depends on what kind of innovation we are talking about, which is the amount of money which is needed to do something relevant, and also in terms of time horizon when this innovation will be needed for the system.
I think that's a very interesting point that you made there. The takeaway I would take from that is that, you know, even as we were speaking between us all on this first aspect, you know, taking the very extreme situation where there is a fragmented ecosystem, is that, you know, initiatives which could be, of course, led by the European Commission, would help bring diverse actors together. As you mentioned, standardization, which is an interesting point because, of course, community-led or industry, or not only industry-led, but also public-led initiatives to standardize the industry could potentially build bridges that in some areas, which you correctly mentioned, are lacking, especially in the energy industry, where we could potentially have more initiatives that would maybe build bridges together, even from a technical point of view. So we think about, of course, the standardizations that happen also in the telecoms industries. That has obviously brought together, you know, very close together the industry, and has better built technologies, for example, in telecommunications, you know, when we talk about, of course, like the 5G industry and now the 6G. And of course, the Commission is definitely moving towards this as well. Which brings me to the second scenario, so to speak. The second scenario, which is basically where there are areas within Europe from an ecosystem point of view where there are those linkages established. So we do have, and we can portray this with another image that we have, which is the building those bridges that have already been built. And we have a lot of examples, I think, of these opportunities having been built already between ecosystem actors. And to a certain extent, some of them have been developed and established, but some of them have not really been effectively or efficiently been used. And I would be curious to hear examples of, you know, those sort of connections to innovation ecosystem between different ecosystem actors, where they still lack and why there might be some, let's say, challenges there. And I wanted to pose, maybe I'll switch to Daria on this, to ask her opinion, maybe from the financial sector, and even thinking about also how the VCs in Europe or the financial industry in Europe, when we compare it even to, let's say, the American industry, where it's all, you know, one big market. In Europe, we have a lot of VCs. We have a lot of regulations. We have different legislation, for example, on financial investment into different regions, compared to, for example, the United States, where there's just one legal system. So this is an example maybe of those bridges that we've built between each other, but we have other challenges. What is your experience with regards to, let's say, in your industry, how maybe there are those bridges, but we still can't really, we can't effectively use them?
Look, Steven, I think that you have touched upon a very important point, on which I was really thinking to focus my intervention. So the fact that in general, in Europe, there is a lack of regulatory harmonization that maybe is also linked to what was being said before about the need for standardization, of course. Because, I mean, overall, the EU innovation policy has performed quite well so far when it comes to creating an innovation ecosystem. We have discussed that they are fragmented. In some cases, there are bridges. In some others, there are not. But we cannot say that these innovation ecosystems are not at the center of the European policy spurring innovation. Just to mention that the EU is intervening to foster the creation of European innovation ecosystem under the pillar third of Horizon Europe. Or in Italy, if we have a look to the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, Italy is about to create 12 national innovation ecosystem by 2026, so investing more than 1.5 billion in total. There is evidence, as I was saying, that these ecosystems are still, as you were saying, also regional or national. And that's one of the main reasons why startups and innovative SMEs, but then that applies also to financial intermediaries to the extent that they are not, of course, covering multi countries. The difficulties to scale up for SMEs are also the existence of barriers to cross-border commercialization of innovative products and services. I remember a study prepared for DigiGrowth, I think by Technopolis, that show how the regulatory costs represent a major obstacle to cross-border commercialization of innovation. Okay, and when the single market, because that is about the completion of the single market, is failing to reach its full potential, SMEs are the most likely to suffer due to their limited resources. And we know that they represent 99% of firms in the EU. And particularly startups and innovative SMEs are prevented from becoming competitive players on an international scale. So why some bridges are not working? But because we need to improve the functioning of the single market. Concurrently, making further progress on completing the capital market union is key. And here, Stephen, we are going back to what you were saying about the venture capital. So there has been a lot of progress made since 2015 when we had the first action plan adopted on the capital market union, but EU capital markets remain fragmented. And here we go back to the objective that we were using before and underdeveloped. So I believe that the implementation of the 16 actions that are included in the 2020 Capital Market Union Action Plan could generate benefit also for the innovation ecosystem, especially if one considers that access to finance is the second most important barrier to innovation experienced by EU SMEs. And more should be done, as you were saying, to venture capital, because if I'm not wrong, still today venture capital investment are 10 times higher in the US than in Europe as a share of GDP, and I think is even more in some Asian countries like Singapore and China or India. So my answer is I know that is not the innovation policy entitled to improve the functioning of the single market, but the way forward to have these bridges working very well for me is that one, Stephen.
Absolutely. That's a very interesting point as well about even the EU capital market as well. Maybe from the EU point of view, I want to turn my attention back to you, Anna, is of course with regards to where the EU maybe sees those bridges that have already been built, especially because, of course, the European Union has, progressively, put a lot of efforts into building, let's say, the ecosystem, and we've seen this also through the Horizon Europe program, the Horizon 2020 program, and all the different framework programs before it. So it is obviously, let's say, the objective of the Commission to sort of bring the scientific community together with, let's say, industry and the financial sector, and of course the EU is key to that. So the bridges have been built, and this has been a very sort of, let's say, a progressive process. is it working in the way that that Europe should be going towards to, in terms of, especially in terms of the competition technically that we face from other innovation ecosystems, China, the US? Do we need to create a different type of bridges? Do we need to improve those bridges, those connections? Where do you see, let's say, the role there in maybe changing the way we build those bridges?
Very interesting question, and I hope I will be able to reply to all these questions. But probably the replies are the challenges that we have to face. First of all, yes, a lot has been done, both in the area of European innovation ecosystem, but also in the area of the EIT, in order to bring the different actors of innovation ecosystem together, in particular the academia sector with the business and the industry. But what we see is that a lot of efforts has been done, but we are not yet there. And we are not yet there for many reasons. First of all, what is the role of higher education in innovation? How far are our education system, the universities and the researchers in the universities, they have entrepreneurial skills and they are able to work with business and industry. And one of the main challenges indeed that we have is to change the approach, the mentality of the researchers and the skills that they have, so that they will be able first to work easier and better with stakeholders coming from the business, but also stakeholders coming from the municipalities, from the regional authorities, and to be able to have a communication between both actors. Because of course, working with the business thinks about benefit, profits. And the researchers, sometimes they only think about, okay, I have a new development, a new results, I have to push it for a new publication, and they don't think on how the outcome of their work could become interesting for the business. And then the way they communicate is completely different as well. So more in the sectorial collaboration, and even I would say in the sectorial mobility and skilling both the science side, but also maybe the employees of the industry on bringing these two worlds together. Because only by bringing these two worlds together, we will be able to upgrade our innovations ecosystem and to compete other ecosystems, as you said, like the United States and China. And second area is, I think it was said, standardizations and also the regulatory framework and alleviating bottlenecks. And I think this is something that is very clear. Innovation or developing further innovation in Europe, new innovation policy could be in the context of the single market. And these are issues that we have to tackle. And concerning the access to finance, a lot has been done. European Union put in place new instruments apart from, of course, Horizon Europe, European Innovation Council, the European Innovation, the EIC Fund, but also InvestEU. But is it enough? And probably it's not enough. And this is where we have to bring more bridges with financial institutions and other key, let's say, players. The Commission in COP26 signed a new MOU between Bill Gates Foundation and the European Commission in order to go forward for projects in the area of the green transition, innovation on green transition. This is a type of collaboration that we have to establish even more in order to be able to improve and increase the access to finance, but also the possibilities for the actors of the innovation ecosystem to collaborate with financial intermediaries, with financial institutions, and with the industry in this context of projects to be established. And I would like also to say that one important thing is that the demand and the supply side. We have also to look, whatever we do, it has to have a strategic focus. And this strategic focus should be also transmitted in the context of collaboration between the different actors of the ecosystem. Last but not least, I think it's extremely important to capitalize of the different stakeholders and participants of the ecosystem. And key participants in the ecosystem are the regional authorities. And I'm saying that because we know in the context of EU funding and EU prioritization that there is a kind of fragmentation between the priorities of research and innovation policies and Horizon Europe funding, and between cohesion policies with smart specialization and structural funds funding. And these two elements, they have to work, these two key pillars, I would say, they have to bring up together. And we have to capitalize of the possibilities that they are existing at regional level, both at priority level and policy level, but also at financial level. And we have to bring these two things together in order to reinforce synergies and deliver common objectives between these two key actors of the ecosystems, because the regions and the local authorities play an important role of developing innovation ecosystems at regional level, and synergies between cohesion policy, regional authorities, research organizations, and institutions and actors, and the industry at local level is extremely important and needs to be further reinforced. Finally, I would like to say from the Commission side, we are preparing a new strategy for universities, because we strongly believe that European universities could play an important role to link also all these activities in the context of the innovation ecosystem.
That's an interesting point there as well, with regards to how, especially from universities and research, really brings in as well, I think, extra, manpower and workforce into even the industry in terms of, building the research and innovation capacity of industry, because that's, of course, as we were mentioning before, that is what needs to be done as well from an industry perspective, to try and bridge that gap between, let's say, the industry and universities to bring in more of that research potential as well into the industry, which is obviously bringing in all of the market-based solutions that we have. I don't know if you have any comment on that last point there, Luca, or if maybe from the industry point of view there are, let's say, we were mentioning, of course, about standardization, but maybe between specific actors that you collaborate with, whether there needs to be some sort of a different approach into building those bridges.
I may try to oversimplify, and please allow me to do that, and excuse me in advance. By what I've heard, even if with different words, on the one side, you said that the researchers tend to research and the enterprises tend to make money, and sometimes they do not meet together, they do not meet each other. And Daria said that the big challenge is the scale up. I think that this is something which should happen naturally. What do I mean? The company wants to make money, and in order to make money, they need innovations. So they go and search for something which allows them to make money. So should be something natural conceptually. In my sector, which is the only one I know, I'm sorry about that. In my sector, what I see is that frequently in this period with the challenges that we have, sometimes this does not happen. Because there is not an enough certainty or enough security of results. So if you have to invest money with too much risk attached on that, you usually don't do that. Probably also because we are the old Europe, we are less risk averse than probably the investors in the western part of United States. But I don't know if this is absolutely true, but this is my opinion too. What happened, for instance, in the case of the development of the renewable sources, wind and solar, there has been a huge investment, an explosion of investments, and now the technology is there and it's available because we have had the long-term tenders by which we remunerate the investors with a long-term contract, providing them the visibility and financiability of this investment. So I think that we need to do the same structurally in our market design of the European energy system. We do not have to invest only and specifically in the short-term markets and in the efficiency of the short-term markets. So the long-term auctions are, in this phase, must not be looked at as an exception to the rule, but as the rule by itself, because with the long-term auctions in storage, in in demand response, in new technologies that we want to unlock, we make available the guaranteed, I don't want to say guaranteed, but the high probability profits, which is the only leverage to convince enterprises to invest in research and innovation. Maybe it's too simplistic.
To say it, that the opportunities exist for any of the, let's say, innovation actors, from big players, industry, to small players, to research, academia. And I do want to obviously have your opinion about this, because you did mention in your last statements that, of course, the opportunities are there, and it's just about exploiting those opportunities. And what we need to do specifically to help innovators, because everyone is an innovator in an innovation ecosystem. What can we do to help those innovators? You know, we're presented with a lot of opportunities, with vast amounts of information, but there might be that part where we're not really exploiting everything that is available to them. So from the perspective, from your perspective of, let's say, from the European Commission, Ms. Panagopoulou, what is your perspective of how we can better exploit these opportunities, both in Europe and also within the European Commission programs?
So I would like to start with actually with the European Commission programs, and in particular with Horizon Europe, because when we have designed the new Horizon Europe program, we try to think in particular what more could be done for innovators and for actors that they could contribute to innovation. And of course, we discussed about the European Innovation Council. It is the new important initiative or instrument that we have put in place, which is fundamental for bringing innovation. It provides a lot of opportunities to innovators across Europe in the different areas of the innovation development, whether we're talking about the very first steps, or whether we are talking about how we can escalate and accelerate innovation. There are different tools available, or whether we are talking about supporting innovators to better understand how they can upgrade their role in the innovation ecosystem. But I would like to say that different innovators in different countries and regions, they have different needs. So the program is addressing research and innovation prioritization of investments through, in particular, the Pillar 2, where we have specific priorities are there addressing the global challenges, including energy, for example, that Luca clearly said about it, where we have missions, concrete areas where innovators, researchers, and industry could work together in order to deliver concrete results for the citizens in the next 7 years. We have the partnerships, where innovators, universities, and the industry are working together on specific areas that have been already identified. But we have the European innovation ecosystem, which supports all the actors to networking, to establish contacts. And we have a new priority that we have put in our program, which complement what is already in Horizon, in Erasmus Plus program, what we can do in order to transform the universities, to help universities, to empower universities to become actors, key actors in the innovation ecosystem. And these are all available financial tools that the innovators, whether they are researchers in a university, or whether they are innovators in a small company, or whether are innovators that they are working in a context of an industry, they can look at and they can benefit of in order to work together better. But I would like to say that one of the most important aspects what we looked in the future is how we can make our universities a key player of the innovation ecosystem. And we think this is extremely important because, as Lucas said, it is also important to bring those universities and the research that they are doing in the universities more closer to the overall picture of the industrial delivery and the delivery solutions for the citizens and the society. And this is where we will try to focus in particular in the coming period, what we can do more in order to make our universities actors to deliver innovation that brings results and that could be work in synergy with the industry, because I believe universities are the place where we have talents, we have people that they think outside the box. I do understand what Lucas said, that we want to look for tested technologies to put in the market, but sometimes we have to look also for genius, new breakthrough innovations that could make big difference for the technological leadership of Europe and for our industries as well.
I definitely find that interesting, that bonds, that especially for, let's say, even for the researchers to exploit these opportunities. I do want to give the word as well to Daria. As we know, also we're a bit short on time as well, but I do want to give a final few comments as well, Daria, how you believe we can exploit these opportunities, maybe from your point of view.
Oh, well, very, very simply, I think that Anna was mentioning of the instruments and programs that are there. No, the point is this is all very complex. Okay, so we have the European Research Council, Marie Curie Action 6 Cluster 5 Mission, co-program partnership, co-founded partnership, European Innovation Council, European Innovation Ecosystems, InvestEU that Anna was mentioning. So imagine that even for a financial institution like CDP, it's not easy to understand how can we create complementarities and synergies among all these funds. I don't know, it took me 1 year to have a list of Seal of Excellence firm that could be a good starting point. I think the InvestEU program is a good example of how things can be simplified, especially because I have 3 pillars, and I believe these 3 pillars should be found in any EU program. You have funding, okay, so you have advisory services that would be extremely helpful to understand how to access European Innovation Council. And then you have a 3rd pillar that is an element of transparency, that is this portal for projects, where demand for financing and offer, let's say, supply of financing are meeting them. So I believe instruments are there, but let's make things easier for those looking for financial opportunities. Thank you, Stephen.
Points of view, how should we better, just to wrap things up from your point of view, to exploit these opportunities, even from, let's say, from your perspective as well, as industry?
Well, I can say that I absolutely agree with Anna that universities are fundamental, and I do not have a broad European experience, but I can say for sure that in my country, this collaboration between universities and private sector for many years has been seen, let me say, also negatively. It hasn't been supported. It's considered as selling the culture for the business. It's totally wrong. And it's something which is changing, as I can see, but it's changing too slowly, at least in our country. Terna has signed an agreement with a consortium of university, and in just 2 years, we have activated 34 research contracts with 20 different universities, and my colleagues were only looking for the tool to do that, and universities have are participating with enthusiasm, but it's something which happened almost by case. So this should become something bigger, at least in my country. I don't know. Anyway, probably in other countries it's different. And in general terms, I think we should also consider the fact that there are some technologies which are needed in 10 years from now, and other technologies which are needed in 20 or 30 years from now. And in the second case, probably the technology agnostic approach, which is the basis of many policy decisions, should be discussed, should be considered carefully. Because if on the one side you say, I want to be technology agnostic, and on the other side you want to go in a direction which is not natural, because fossil fuels still are much cheaper than the alternatives, maybe this is a conflict which must be somehow cut through with a top-down decision. I want to do the hydrogen. I want to do the hydrogen grids, for instance. That's my decision, full stop. And we will do them. And then the investors will know that they will be done, and they will put money on them. Otherwise, sometimes you make big declarations, but in the end, when you have to put the money on that, you say, okay, let's wait and see if it happens or not.
Absolutely. Very interesting as well, especially from that point of view. It's very important to take initiatives, especially in investing in new technologies, especially risky technologies, and that's where, of course, both the European Union, financial intermediaries, and industry would come together and obviously create a final, let's say, push towards that. I'd like to close off. Thank you very much all for your participation. I'd like to thank, first of all, Anna Panagopoulou from the European Commission. Thank you so much for being with us today. Daria Ciriaci from Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, and of course Luca Marchisio from Terna. We thank you all for your very insightful comments. Grazie a tutti voi. Chiaramente adesso andremo poi alla chiusura della conferenza, quindi vi invitiamo chiaramente a aspettare appunto per adesso la chiusura della conferenza. Grazie a tutti e ci vediamo dopo. Grazie, thank you.
Allora, benvenuti a tutti a questa sessione di chiusura della conferenza. Siamo alla fine di una lunga settimana per voi, ma soprattutto anche per noi. È stata impegnativa anche quest'anno. Vi porto un po' di numeri. Sono stati 5 giorni di diretta, 27 ore di conferenza, 23 ore di diretta live. Abbiamo avuto 55 speaker esterni, cioè senza comprendere quelli che sono stati i contributi del personale di APRE. Quest'anno abbiamo fatto 2.934 iscritti, con picchi giornalieri che sono andati dalle 500 alle 1.200 unità presenti in conferenza. Per noi sono grandi numeri e una grande soddisfazione. Una grande soddisfazione perché? Perché quando l'altro anno chiusi la conferenza dissi una cosa, vi ricordo che la conferenza l'anno scorso fu esattamente nel periodo forse più complesso del Covid, fu nella primavera, scusate, era giugno del 2020. Quella conferenza la volemmo a tutti i costi per dimostrare tante cose. Quest'anno la situazione fortunatamente è un po' diversa, ma abbiamo voluto ancora la conferenza in maniera forte per un motivo, per dimostrare che quello che siamo riusciti a fare l'anno scorso saremmo riusciti a farlo ancora. E l'abbiamo fatto ancora e continueremo a farlo. In che senso? Non è una minaccia evidentemente, è un qualche cosa che ci siamo ripromessi di trasformare in un impegno che continuerà negli anni. La conferenza aveva l'anno scorso un titolo, quest'anno ha un titolo fondamentalmente simile e abbiamo deciso di dare questo titolo una presenza costante alla conferenza. Questa conferenza, la conferenza annuale di APRE, si chiamerà Verso un nuovo futuro. E poi aggiungeremo di anno in anno un sottotitolo, se volete, un tema. Quest'anno è stato quello che abbiamo messo al centro della discussione, il rapporto tra scienza e società. Perché? Perché ci sono tanti motivi per parlare di scienza e società. Abbiamo dei problemi forti in questo momento ancora nel sistema a livello mondiale, anche nel nostro paese. C'è una pandemia che ha segnato e ha cambiato tante liturgie nei rapporti della comunicazione e sul fronte anche della percezione, della vorrei dire fiducia che almeno parte della popolazione ha avuto rispetto per esempio al mondo scientifico. Quindi c'era un problema da affrontare ed era molto caldo ed è un problema tuttora non risolto. Ma perché scienza e società? Perché al di là di quello che è il quotidiano e la cronaca di oggi, c'è poco da fare. Noi abbiamo un messaggio chiaro dalla Commissione europea. Il rapporto scienza e società è al centro del nuovo programma Horizon Europe. Lo sapete benissimo e lo sa benissimo chi conosce, chi fa il nostro mestiere e quindi è portato a parlare di programma quadro. Oggi interpretare correttamente il programma quadro significa non tralasciare quello che è il rapporto tra scienza e società. E questo non solo perché è un fatto etico, perché è interessante, è corretto, è giusto e ce lo possiamo declinare e spiegare in mille maniere, ma perché anche se lo vogliamo vedere pragmaticamente, per chi fa un mestiere come il nostro, cioè quello di APRE, cioè quello di aiutare a partecipare chiaramente agli stakeholder nazionali e ad avvicinarsi a partecipare e speriamo anche a vincere le call del programma quadro, oggi non possiamo prescindere dal fatto che scrivere bene un progetto significa avere un'attenzione su cose che alcuni programmi quadro fanno, nessuno ci richiedeva. Bene, queste cose nuove sono proprio la capacità di saper descrivere all'interno anche di una proposta che quello che si va a fare ha un impatto diretto sul beneficio. Chiaramente non tutti i progetti cambieranno, stravolgeranno il futuro della società, ma comunque dimostrare che c'è una attenzione, che quello che si fa, il modo in cui si investono, si richiedono soldi pubblici, debba avere una ricaduta forte. Quindi scienza e società per contribuire, pur nel nostro piccolo, a una riflessione che dovrà riportare ad una riformulazione, una rinascita, un rinnovamento di un rapporto più sano tra scienza e società, perché questo ne abbiamo bisogno in questo momento, ma soprattutto anche perché c'è un problema di efficacia di quello che tendiamo a fare. Quando l'abbiamo capito ormai da tanto tempo, fare innovazione non è solo affrontare una sfida tecnologica o scientifica. Fare innovazione significa avere delle buone soluzioni, delle grandi idee per innovare da un punto di vista tecnico-scientifico, ma soprattutto significa anche preoccuparsi che queste novità, queste soluzioni, queste nuove possibilità che in qualche modo la scienza ci dà, ci regala, ci fornisce, debbano essere comprese, debbano essere accettate. Non può esserci innovazione se non c'è un sistema sociale che sarà in grado di recepire questa innovazione. Ecco, questo è il motivo per cui parlare di scienza e società non è un esercizio asettico, è un esercizio che rientra perfettamente anche in quello che è la missione di APRE. Perché? Perché senza questa dimensione, senza una corretta interpretazione di questo, non si scrivono neanche o non si scriveranno neanche buoni progetti nel futuro. E questo, che ci piaccia o no, è un qualche cosa su cui dobbiamo fare i conti. L'anno scorso, nella conclusione della conferenza, parlai sicuramente di uscita dalla comfort zone, parlai di passare da una dimensione di staticità e sicurezza a una dimensione di dinamicità e incertezza. Ecco, nell'ultimo anno io ho usato sempre più spesso anche un'altra coppia di parole che secondo me danno una chiave di lettura forte su quelle che sono le novità e il corretto approccio verso Horizon Europe. Uso la parola complessità, l'ho sempre detto in tempi non sospetti, molto prima, diversi anni fa, che secondo personalmente, la mia personale chiaramente valutazione, Horizon Europe era molto più che una semplice evoluzione di Horizon 2020, ma ha segnato una rivoluzione per tanti versi. Oggi Horizon Europe è un programma complesso. Non è forse tanto complesso nei meccanismi di partecipazione, perché da quel punto di vista la Commissione forse ha tentato anche di semplificare, ma lo è sicuramente per la strutturazione del programma e per la capacità di diversi punti di aggressione del programma. Ecco, la parola è proprio questa. Bisogna imparare a capire che forse per vincere bene o vincere con la V maiuscola la partita di Horizon Europe, certamente è importante concentrarsi su la call. A me interessa quella cosa, mi occupo scientificamente di questo, c'è una call che mi piace, cerco di entrare in un partenariato, di costruire un partenariato per quello, ma è qualcosa di più. Oggi partecipare in maniera forte a Horizon Europe significa probabilmente cercare di fare i conti con la complessità di Horizon Europe. Ma la complessità non è solamente un problema, perché la complessità nasconde da questo punto di vista tantissime opportunità. Ed ecco qui la nuova coppia di parole che vorrei lasciare anche quest'anno. Complessità, sì, è vero, è un programma complesso, ma attenzione, dentro la complessità ci sono tante opportunità, bisogna imparare ad andarsele a cercare e a tirarle fuori. Velocissimamente, siamo a novembre, questa volta mai come quest'anno abbiamo fatto la conferenza vicino a Natale, siamo quasi praticamente a fine anno e dobbiamo parlare di bilanci. No, troppo presto. Ci siamo capiti male con gli occhiali, era molto più intensa l'occhiata che volevo dare. Fermiamolo un attimo perché c'è ancora qualche cosa che poi lo faremo partire più tardi. Quello. Allora vi dicevo, bilanci di Horizon Europe, bilanci di un primo anno di Horizon Europe. Allora, Horizon Europe nel 2021 per noi è stata una sfida forte, perché è stata una sfida di preparazione, è stata una sfida che ci ha portato a organizzare tantissimi eventi, abbiamo avuto gli Info Day a luglio, una settimana Info Day e ci ritroviamo adesso a novembre noi con una settimana di conferenza, ma tantissime altre cose nel mentre. È stata veramente una conferenza, è stato veramente un anno impegnativo da questo punto di vista. Ma è stato un anno impegnativo perché chiaramente è una partenza di un nuovo programma e i livelli di assistenza che stiamo sperimentando in questi momenti non sono quelli evidentemente della fase finale di un programma quadro, sono quelli delle punte di inizio di un programma quadro. È stato un anno di formazione. Quando dico un anno di formazione vorrei farvi osservare una cosa, che non è solo un anno di formazione perché noi cerchiamo di fare formazione e dare informazione sul programma quadro, ma è stato un anno di formazione anche per noi. Horizon Europe non è un programma nuovo solamente per gli stakeholder, è anche nuovo per noi che dobbiamo andarlo a raccontare. E dobbiamo anche forse formarci più rapidamente e in maniera migliore, perché altrimenti come si fa a fornire del valore a chi dobbiamo aiutare? Quindi da questo punto di vista un anno estremamente impegnativo. Un anno che a questo punto, siamo a novembre, possiamo considerare praticamente concluso, e vediamo che cosa ci abbiamo davanti per il 22. Il 22 è un anno, dal mio punto di vista, o almeno per quello che sarà, per un anno di prime valutazioni. Cioè noi vogliamo capire che cosa è andato. E capire che cosa è andato evidentemente lo faremo cercando di capire come si è comportato il sistema paese, cioè gli stakeholder nella sua generalità. Chiaramente questo non è una cosa che faremo noi, la faremo noi insieme a un sistema, a cominciare dal Ministero, e per quello che possiamo fare contribuiremo però a questo ragionamento. Quindi cercheremo di fare una fotografia di quella che è stata la partecipazione al World Program 2021. Ma è un anno di valutazione anche per APRE, perché noi valuteremo anche noi stessi, cioè l'abbiamo affrontato bene, abbiamo capito, abbiamo trovato le narrative giuste per raccontare il programma nella sua complessità, non l'abbiamo trovate, abbiamo bisogno di mettere in campo altre strumentazioni. Bene, tutto questo per dire che il 2022 sarà un anno di valutazione. Dice, ma è troppo presto? No, non è troppo presto, perché se aspettiamo il 23 poi siamo già in fase di considerazione di quello che sarà il midterm e abbiamo finito il programma 4. Dobbiamo farlo subito. Quindi il 22 sarà un anno che spenderemo per questo. Il 22 sarà un anno ancora che ci, almeno sicuramente in talune dinamiche, scoprirete che utilizzeremo ancora la parola giovani in maniera abbastanza forte. Perché i giovani? Perché qualcuno qualche volta ne abbiamo anche parlato, dice ma APRE non si occupa di giovani. È vero, ma se pensate che abbiamo dato a questa conferenza il nome di Verso un nuovo futuro, vabbè, a meno di non essere demagogici, non si può fare i conti su una società che tra 25-30 anni sarà quella che riceverà gli effetti di quelle scelte che oggi si fanno anche in campo di strategie scientifiche, tecniche, industriali, di innovazione. E quindi c'è poco da fare. Quello che facciamo oggi è qualcosa che toccherà evidentemente le generazioni che oggi hanno 20-25 anni e tra 20-30 anni saranno le generazioni che saranno al centro anche del potere, anche della gestione di questo paese e di tutto quello che è il sistema europeo. Quindi continueremo a giocare con i giovani, giocare perché ci divertiamo spesso a giocare con i giovani, perché impariamo un sacco di cose interessanti. Lo abbiamo fatto già dall'anno scorso con l'ANG, quindi l'Agenzia Nazionale dei Giovani, l'abbiamo fatto, lo continuiamo a fare con ANG, continueremo a farlo con Ashoka, l'abbiamo fatto quest'anno in particolare con Ashoka quando abbiamo portato dei giovani changemaker, quindi movimento changemaker che nella dimensione italiana è controllato da Ashoka Italia, è gestito da Ashoka Italia, e abbiamo fatto un dialogo con il direttore generale Jean-Éric Paquet. È questo lo spirito che vogliamo fare. Sappiamo che per noi è un'attività marginale, però ci crediamo, vogliamo dare anche noi questo nostro contributo per provare a costruire un po' di quello che domani dovrebbe essere una consapevolezza nel mondo anche dei giovani, che probabilmente aiuta a creare una società più capace anche di non fare a pugni con quella che è l'innovazione tecnico-scientifica. Ora vado verso le conclusioni, l'ultima considerazione. Anche quest'anno abbiamo fatto una conferenza lunga, pesante, abbiamo fatto una conferenza di una settimana. La prima cosa io misi sul tavolo a maggio, quando cominciamo a progettare la conferenza, fu una richiesta. Voglio una conferenza, ho usato un termine, liquida, fluida. In realtà non ci siamo riusciti integralmente, anche se abbiamo cominciato ad annacquarla contaminando elementi diversi all'interno della stessa conferenza. È lungo fare una settimana di conferenza, ma sono anche tante le cose, i contenuti che vogliamo portare. Ripeto, noi abbiamo avuto 55 relatori esterni, ma sappiamo che avremmo avuto spazio e voglia di dare voce a molte altre persone, ed è quello che faremo nel corso del tempo. Chiaramente cerchiamo anche ogni anno di alternare e dare voci diverse. Ecco, l'impegno da questo punto di vista è che il prossimo anno cercheremo di fare un po' più di fluidità. Paradossalmente mi piacerebbe arrivare verso una conferenza che fondamentalmente non è dall'8 al 12, ma comincerà a essere più diluita. Allora, siamo andati alla fine di questa mia breve chiusura. Non ho parlato, come vi sarete resi conto, di tutto quello che è accaduto, perché sono accadute tante cose. Noi speriamo che le abbiate trovate interessanti, abbiamo cercato di costruirle con l'intento di renderle interessanti, qualche volta di renderle anche piacevoli. Abbiamo contaminato quest'anno la conferenza con nuovi elementi e certamente avremmo voluto anche noi lavorare in maniera un po' diversa. Dietro di me vedete delle immagini che vi raccontano un po' quello che è un nostro modo di arrivare verso la conclusione di questa conferenza che purtroppo non abbiamo potuto fare dal vivo, non abbiamo potuto farvi neanche un saluto dal vivo come avremmo voluto in questa sala tutti insieme, così come facemmo nel 2019 quando ci lasciammo sul palco di una conferenza fisica, in quel momento con tutto lo staff di APRE. Arriviamo alle conclusioni, perché a questo punto è questo quello che mi resta da fare. Vabbè, cominciamo da cosa? Comincio dalla fine, perché sono quelli che saranno gli ultimi a schiacciare il bottone di pausa. Ringrazio chiaramente tutto lo staff della regia. Non importa adesso se non riusciamo a mandare la foto, non vi preoccupate, però insomma la metteremo sicuramente sul sito, perché per voi sembra forse poco, ma per una struttura fondamentalmente piccolina come APRE, fare e organizzare e gestire una conferenza con questi numeri, anche da un punto di vista di tecnico, che come sapete è tutto fatto in casa, non è facile. E quindi grazie ancora alla regia, ma la regia in questo caso è solamente la punta dell'iceberg, perché evidentemente dietro di loro c'è tutta quell'organizzazione che conoscete bene, che a cominciare dagli speaker, che a cominciare dalle persone che hanno organizzato i contenuti, tutto quanto sono stati i veri protagonisti di questa. Quindi tanto ringraziamento ad APRE, il prossimo ringraziamento è chiaramente al pubblico, grazie per averci seguito in questa lunga settimana. Non è stato facile, ma l'invito è anche quello di fruire una settimana così complessa a morsi, come una mela. Andate a mordere quello che vi interessa e cercate di ritrovarvi in quello che più vi aggrada. Non c'è bisogno di seguirla tutta dal lunedì al martedì. I soci, ringraziamento ai soci. Noi ci siamo perché ci sono i nostri soci. Il grazie ai soci non è solo perché permettono ad APRE di essere APRE, ma soprattutto perché con loro noi costruiamo gran parte dei contenuti su cui ragioniamo. Il fatto che dentro la conferenza alcune componenti della conferenza siano ancora riservate ai soci non è per una questione di non totale trasparenza, ma perché è un momento per noi di lavorare insieme ai nostri soci, e questo ci arricchisce in una maniera grandissima. I 3 APRE Space che abbiamo messo in campo quest'anno sono 3 APRE Space che hanno esattamente la visione di essere l'inizio di un ragionamento che ci proietta verso il 2022. Devo chiaramente ringraziare tutti gli speaker, come al solito sono speaker di altissimo livello, sono speaker che in qualche modo danno lustro e danno onore anche alla nostra conferenza, e per quanto ci riguarda non solo li ringraziamo veramente dal profondo del cuore, ma ci teniamo a fare in modo che certi standard rimangano all'interno della nostra conferenza. Quello che ci dispiace è di non poter averli sempre tutti con noi, perché sennò la settimana invece di durare 5 giorni durerebbe probabilmente un mese. A questo punto, come vedete, noi stiamo qui per chiudere il tutto, e quello che avete visto alle mie spalle mentre stavo parlando non è altro che un tentativo di riportare sul palco tutti quanti noi, Abbiamo idealmente giocato, evidentemente è un gioco, ci piace qualche volta detenzionarsi nella tensione dell'organizzazione, qualche volta questi giochini ci aiutano a rilassarci un po', è un modo di portare sul palco tutti quelli che avete visto e anche quelli che non avete visto. Adesso, piano piano, siamo tanti, ci siamo arrivati alla fine e fondamentalmente questo è quello che vorremmo lasciarvi come augurio. Credo che Monique adesso mi passa questo foglio e al di là di quello che c'è scritto in questo foglio, che evidentemente è un foglio simbolico, che non è quello che abbiamo realmente scritto, ci sono delle banalità travolgenti, qui dentro c'è scritto veramente da parte di APRE un arrivederci al 2022, un arrivederci alla prossima conferenza APRE 2022, con la speranza questa volta davvero di trovarci tutti insieme, non solo attraverso uno schermo. Grazie ancora e arrivederci al prossimo anno.